how many of the stresses I got ready for were real. That wasn't a problem potentially for your grandparents. And modern day stress seems to take the shape of death by 1,000 cuts. Now, in the modern world that isn't full of saber-toothed tigers or big attacks, it's fair to say most people aren't excessively stressed. But the modern world is creating an environment of inadequately recovered and relaxed. At what point today will your body truly believe there is no low-level threat it needs to deal with? No email notification, no WhatsApp, no 24-hour news cycle, no needing to go and pick the kids up from school. At what point? And we can look at modern-day stress as not big, huge moments, a moving house, a bereavement, a divorce. Those are significant life events. But instead, modern-day stress seems to take the shape of death by 1,000 cuts. Continual stimulus, continual small-grade activation of this sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. Now, the human body is designed to spend long periods of time where we don't get that balance right. And ultimately, we were designed as human machines for famine, an inadequate abundance of resources. We were designed for war, we were designed for childbirth, periods where we just cannot get quality recovery over weeks, months, maybe even years. So what we don't want to do is create a problem by the measurement of data. If I measure someone's had inadequate recovery over 24 hours, that's not a health concern, that's not a symptom concern, it's an observation. And again, with all things energy equation, we're trying to match that to the individual in front of us. When we look at individuals like Sir Steve Redgrave, what we see is someone who meets this pattern. Not big, huge stressors in Sir Steve's lifestyle, but a fundamental inability to disconnect, a fundamental inability to switch off. And the absence of stress does not mean the presence of recovery, i.e., Steve coming out of the bedroom and watching TV breaks, again, a pattern of stress, but doesn't induce recovery. In fact, TV is just another form of stimulus in most cases, possibly with the exception of humor. So if I'm watching a very dark Netflix series versus something light and familiar, there'll be quite a different physiological response to those two. Human stress is interesting. There's only a few true stresses. A true stress is heat. If I heat up the room you're in, you'll get a very standardized response. Your body will move into that accelerator pedal. If I give you a really annoying noise, like a loud engine taking off, then you'll go into that sympathetic alert state. If I give you something really heavy to carry, load, then over time, you'll move into that state. But actually, most of the other things that put us into that sympathetic alert state are what we perceive. Not what's happening, but what we perceive is happening. A good example of that is people flying on an aeroplane. I used to have a bit of a fear of flying. And you'd say, that would create a stress for me. Why? Well, of course, the stress of flying was not a stress of flying. It was a stress of potentially dying. I was thinking that the plane I was in was not going to land in my lovely Lanzarote 2-star hotel. It was actually going to crash and I was going to die. And so while the plane's taking off, my physiology is putting that accelerator pedal flat to the floor as I anticipate something terrible to happen. Whereas the person next to me, probably a family member, has got the feet up, pina colada, loving life. The same event is happening to both of us. We're both on a plane flying to the same destination, but I've anticipated something going wrong and my physiology has followed. I've pushed the accelerator pedal, heart rate goes up, breathing goes up, sugar gets released, blood pressure goes up, and that creates that sense of anxiety that, if unmanaged, could lead into a panic attack. The person next to me, the same thing is happening, but their perception is they're on a plane, they're going on holiday, fantastic. And we always ask ourselves the question, how many of the stresses I got ready for were real, and how many of the stresses I worried about actually happened? When you look at this, you'll see a growing number of people adopting techniques that trick them out of a difficult future into a lovely present. Tools like meditation and most notably mindfulness. The modern day plague, if you like, is hyperstimulation causing hypervigilance and our inability to disconnect from the modern world. And that wasn't a problem potentially for your grandparents and their parents, where the world didn't give you thousands of notifications and a 24-hour light, noise and news schedule. But it is a problem for you and it is a problem for me. Your great-grandparents got something from drinking water that you probably don't. Over the last century, we've made water safer to drink, on the whole, but something has been lost in the process. Natural water sources once provided essential minerals that our bodies evolved with over thousands of years. Today's water, even premium bottled at source water, contains 78% fewer minerals than it did just a century ago. In fact, you'd have to drink 1.5 bathtubs to replenish the minerals that you lose in a litre of sweat. So if you think your water is hydrating you optimally, think again. PureSport, a company that I personally trust and use, solves this problem for high performers through their Ultra Electrolytes, a science-backed ratio of electrolytes in one single sachet. Optimize your hydration and leave the bath for bathing. Use our exclusive discount code EE10 at www.puresport.co for 10% off. But what we have to understand is when we see people getting unwell, in many cases where we see people suffering from dysfunction due to the volume of pressures they're facing, we see an imbalance between how long the inside of that body is spending accelerated versus on the brake pedal. In other words, how often is the inside of an individual anticipating threat and this activation sympathetic nervous system is dominant? Now, of course, the human machine is designed to have periods where it's ready for threat and ready for calm. But we have to offset what is the trigger for driving these two nervous system state. And it's what you anticipate is about to happen next. So this idea of my inside matching the outside world is really important. And it's important because the modern world is telling us a little bit all the time, I need to be ready. We've used the word anxiogenic before in the energy equation. Anxiogenic means my environment is trying to make me a bit worried. It's trying to make me thinking about what's about to happen next. The continual exposure to 24-hour news, the continual relentless social media onslaught of people's lives who look a little bit better than mine. All of these things are telling your body to be slightly ready for a threat. And there's a real absence in the modern world of moments where our body can be truly physiologically calm and go into that energy restoration brake pedal mode. We can speak about this with a bit more certainty because we can actually measure the balance between when a human is ready for threat and when it's on the brake pedal ready to restore energy through a technology called heart rate variability. And some of you might have a device on your wrist or wearing it on your finger that's measuring exactly that, heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is a mechanism by looking at the small changes from beat to beat in your heart rate that we can determine which nervous system is in charge of the inside of your body. Is the inside of your body ready for threat? Is the inside of your body ready for resting and digesting and calm? And what we see with heart rate variability is a modern day tool to work out who is suffering from too much time spent too ready. When I first tried to measure stress in clinical environments, it was really difficult. And there is no singular measure that would tell someone whether they're stressed or not stressed or heading for a burnout, etc. There's an amalgam of their story, their symptoms, their history, and clinical data. But what we do tend to see is that when people are running out of energy, they're spending too much time in each 24-hour cycle ready for threat and inadequate time resting and recovering. And when I first started looking at high-performing individuals, I was surprised that most of them didn't report high levels of stress, largely because they controlled lots of the big stressors that affect other human beings. They were in control of their finances. They're in control of many of the key variables. Could they feed their family? Could they go on holiday? That some of us haven't got such luxury around. But their pattern was consistent in the fact they didn't have too much stress, but they did have inadequate recovery. They had inadequate time where the physiology inside believed there was no threat, even at a low level. Their brake pedal was absent and the accelerator was slightly on. And we measured that by looking at heart rate variability over these 24-hour cycles and seeing very little recovery, very little time in parasympathetic tone. And the technology that we use on the energy equation is measuring heart rate variability across a 3-day cycle. And what it's looking for is the individual in front of us having too much time on the accelerator pedal? And if so, how much are they pushing on that pedal? Are they having adequate time on the brake pedal? And if so, is that quality recovery? And to a certain extent, every technology provider, whether you wear a device on your wrist or on your finger, they've got their own algorithm to turn that into something meaningful. Most notably, a recovery score. And that recovery score is really saying, as a battery, you've got to expend energy and recoup energy. Are you neglecting the recouping?